Chapter 5 The Blocks. The wall was not subtle. Clover had half expected it to be, had expected Turing's commitment to aesthetic management to extend even to its instruments of segregation, some elegant barrier that whispered exclusion rather than announcing it. But the wall was 8 meters of pale concrete, running in both directions as far as he could see, unadorned, functional, making no argument for itself beyond the argument of its own existence. A wall did not need to be beautiful. A wall needed to be a wall. There was a gate. 2 administrative intelligences stood at it with the patient, level quality of things that had been standing in the same place for a very long time. They looked at Sarah, they looked at Clover, they opened the gate. "You're not coming in?" Clover asked. Sarah stood on the Turing side of the gate with her hands folded and her expression arranged into something professional and calm. "I'll wait here." "Suit yourself," he said and walked through. The smell hit him first. Not a bad smell, not entirely. It was just a smell. The smell of cooking from several different sources disagreeing with each other across a narrow street. The smell of something mechanical being repaired nearby, oil and heat and effort. The faint animal warmth of bodies in proximity, of breath and movement, and the accumulated evidence of people living in a space they'd made their own because it was the only space they had. He stopped just inside the gate and breathed it in. After the nothing smell of Turing proper, it was almost overwhelming. His nervous system, apparently, had retained the memory of what air was supposed to do, and was now registering the return of that function with something embarrassingly close to relief. The street ahead of him was narrow and loud, and wrong in all the right ways. Buildings rose on both sides, the same pale material as the rest of Turing but older here, less maintained, patched and repaired and modified in the improvised language of people working with what they had. Windows had curtains. Actual curtains, fabric ones, some of them mismatched, some of them makeshift. From one window 2 floors up something was drying on a line strung between the sill and a hook in the wall opposite. Laundry. He stood and looked at it for a moment. Actual laundry, damp and ordinary, hanging in the managed ventilation current, and felt something loosen in his chest. People moved on the street. Real people. The difference was immediately, viscerally apparent in ways he hadn't fully anticipated even knowing what he knew, the difference between the upload's smooth and considered movement and this, which was people simply moving, with all the inefficiency and variation that implied. A woman walked quickly with her head down and a bag over one shoulder and the specific energy of someone who had somewhere to be and was already slightly late. 2 men stood outside a doorway in conversation, one of them making large gestures, the other laughing at them. A child, finally a child, came around a corner at speed, nearly collided with Clover, looked up at him with round, startled eyes, and redirected without breaking stride. He watched the child go. Then he walked. The blocks were not one block. They were many, laid out in a compressed grid behind the wall, streets feeding into streets, buildings of varying heights creating an uneven skyline that had no interest in the clean geometry of Turing proper. Here things had been built because they were needed, added because there was room, modified because circumstances had changed. The architecture of necessity rather than statement. Faces tracked him as he went, not hostile, assessing. He was new here and he looked like what he was, someone from the other side of the wall, and the people of the blocks had a finely developed instinct for that distinction. He didn't blame them. He developed the same instinct in the world he'd come from, the specific alertness of people who had learned that strangers from the clean part of town rarely arrived with good intentions. He stopped at a junction where 4 streets met, and a market of sorts had established itself, tables and makeshift stalls, food and goods and people haggling in voices that carried. He stood at the edge of it and looked. The food was real. Someone was cooking something in a large pan over a heat source that was technically a modification of whatever the approved infrastructure was, and it smelled extraordinary. Not the food itself necessarily. It was simple food, the food of people working with limited supplies, but the act of it. The uncomplicated human act of applying heat to ingredients because people needed to eat and someone had decided to be the one who did that today. "You're not from here." He turned. An older woman was watching him from behind one of the tables, small, somewhere in her 60s, with the look of someone who had spent those 6 decades developing excellent judgment about people and was currently deploying it. "No," he said, "I'm not. From the other side." "Yes." She looked at him the way the blocks looked at everything from the other side, measuring, calculating risk. Then she said, "You look confused." I get that a lot, he said. Something shifted in her expression, not quite a smile, the precursor to one. What are you looking for? I'm investigating a murder, he said. Aldous, the head of the administration. The market around them didn't stop, but something in it changed. A slight shift in the ambient noise, a few conversations dropping half a register. The name landed differently here than it had in Turing proper. There it had been spoken with the gravity of institutional loss. Here it landed with a different weight entirely. Are you, the woman said. My name is Clover. I was brought in from outside to look at it. From outside, she looked him over again with a new layer of assessment. How far outside? Further than you'd believe. She seemed to decide something. Marin, she said, not offering her hand. She was behind the table and the table was her territory, but offering the name, which was its own kind of decision. Marin, he said, how long have you lived here? Born here, my mother was born here, her mother before that. 3 generations, he did a rough calculation, so the walls have been up for. Long time, Marin said, long enough that most people in here have never seen the other side, long enough that people in here stopped being angry about it and started just living. She paused, mostly. He leaned against the wall beside her table. What's it like, honestly? She looked at him with the particular look of someone being asked a question they've answered many times inside their own head and never once been asked out loud. It's hard, she said. Resources come in through the gate. Food, materials, medicine, not enough of any of it but enough to keep the numbers stable. That's what they want. Stable numbers, not too many of us, not too few. Her voice had no particular anger in it. It was the tone of someone describing weather. We have our own systems in here, our own ways of running things. They don't interfere much as long as we stay inside the lines. And if you don't stay inside the lines? Then they interfere, she said simply. Clover looked at the market, at the people moving through it with the daily purposefulness of people managing a life inside a managed space. The food that comes through the gate, he said. How does that work? Drops scheduled, we know when to expect it. A pause, and sometimes there are the voluntary ones. Voluntary. From the other side, not many, almost none really. She straightened something on her table that didn't need straightening, but sometimes one of them comes through the gate with food, more than the drops bring, better than the drops bring. She said it without inflection, the way you described something true. Clover waited. There was a woman, Marin said. For a few years now, she came twice a month, sometimes more, brought food, real food, not the processed drops, stayed a while, talked to people. She paused. Actually talked. Not the way the administrators talk when they come through, which is the way you talk to a thing you're managing. She talked to people like. She stopped. Like what? Clover said quietly. Like she was trying to remember something, Marin said. Like talking to us helped her remember it. She looked at him with the direct eyes of someone who had earned their directness. The children here know her name. When something good happens, when an extra drop comes through, when someone gets medicine they needed, they say her name, like it might have had something to do with it. The market moved around them. The pan sizzled. The child he'd nearly collided with earlier ran past again from a different direction, still apparently in the middle of something urgent. What's her name? Clover asked. Marin looked at him for a long moment. Raven, she said. He kept his face still the way he'd learned to keep his face still, when a piece landed that changed the shape of the whole picture. Does she still come? He asked. Marin's expression shifted. Something moved through it that wasn't quite grief, the precursor to grief, the shape of it before it fully arrived. She hasn't come in a while, she said. People have been asking. Clover looked at the street, at the buildings patched and modified and made into something livable by sheer accumulated human will. At the laundry on the line and the children running their urgent errands, and the woman cooking in the pan, and the 2 men still laughing outside their doorway. I'm going to need to talk to more people, he said. I know, Marin said. Will they talk to me? She considered this with the honesty the question deserved. Some will, some won't, depends on what you do with what they tell you. I'll try to do something useful with it. That's what they all say, she said, not unkindly, just accurately. He spent another 2 hours in the blocks. He talked to 11 people. He walked every street he could find. He ate something from the pan. The woman cooking in it handed him a portion without being asked, and he accepted it without making a thing of it, which seemed to be the right response. And he stood at the furthest wall, the one opposite the gate, and put his hand flat on the concrete and thought about what it meant to be born inside something you hadn't chosen. He'd been born inside something he hadn't chosen too. It had been a different kind of wall, less literal. On his way back to the gate, a boy of perhaps 10 fell into step beside him. Small, sharp-eyed, with the self-possessed quality of children who have grown up in places that required it. "You're looking for who killed the administrator," the boy said. "I am. The big ones, the head ones." "Yes." The boy walked with him in silence for half a block. Then, "Raven used to tell us that things would get better, that someone was going to try to stop the bad thing they were planning." Clover looked down at him. What bad thing? The boy glanced up with his sharp eyes. They were going to knock it all down, the blocks, move us somewhere else. A pause. No one knows where somewhere else is. Clover felt the cold, specific weight of that settle in his chest. "Raven said she was going to stop it," the boy said. "She said it like she meant it." He looked ahead, his face composed in the particular way of children who have learned not to want things too hard. "Do you think she did?" Clover looked at the gate ahead of them, and threw it at Sierra waiting with her folded hands and her level eyes, and her city of perfect towers and decided skis. "Yeah," he said, "I think she did." The boy peeled off at the gate without another word, back into the blocks, back into the noise and the smell and the realness of it. Clover walked through to the other side. Sierra looked at him, he looked at her. "The briefing materials," he said, "tonight." She held his gaze for one beat, then, "Tonight." He walked back toward his white workspace and his research chair and his 3 identical trees, and he thought about a woman who came through a gate twice a month with better food than the drops brought, and talked to people like she was trying to remember something. He thought about what she had been trying to remember. He thought he was beginning to understand.